In the past few decades, humankind has increasingly become concerned about the conditions of its life, and probably only the last 50 years humanity started to take care of the quality of the natural environment. For a long time, almost during the entire history of human existence, and man considered the environment subordinate to himself completely. By the middle of the 20th century, this attitude has indeed led to terrible consequences. Many species of animals and plants disappeared from the face of the earth because of uncontrolled destruction by man. Many territories became practically lifeless because of severe pollution by heavy metals, oil products, household garbage, waste from mining, chemical and other types of industries. Let's consider some concepts that we will use in this lecture. Let's consider some concepts what we will use in this lecture. Today, under the term environment, people understand the natural conditions of some terrain and its ecological state. The environment is usually viewed as a part of the medium that interacts with this living organism, human, animal, and so on, including objects of animate and inanimate nature. The phrase environment, as a rule, is applied of the description of the natural conditions on the Earth's surface, the state of the local and global ecosystems, and their interaction with man. In this sense, the term is used in international agreements. It should be noted that today human activity has covered actually the entire geographical shell, and its scale is now comparable so that of global natural processes which negatively affects the environmental conditions. For example, the volume of rocks transported by humankind as a result of mining and construction works is comparable to the volume of rock transported as a result of geological processes. So, man has become another force that constantly changes the face of our planet. Another concept that is now known even to high school students is the ecology. Ecology is the science on the interactions of living organisms and their communities, with each another, of which the environment. The term was first proposed by German biologist Ernst Haeckel in 1866 in the book General Morphology of Organisms. It should be noted that ecology is not synonymous with environmentalism, natural history, or environmental science. It overlaps with the closely related science of evolution, biology, genetics, and ethnology. An important focus for ecologists is to improve the understanding of how biodiversity affects ecological function. Ecology seeks to explain life processes, interactions, and adaptations, the movement of the materials and energy through living communities, the successional development of ecosystems, the abundance and distribution of organisms and biodiversity in the context of the environment. Let's consider some features of influence of human activity on the environment. The first one has already been mentioned above. Humanity has become a driving force that is comparable to some nature forces. The second feature, human activity violates the ecological balance and covers all the earth shells. Let's consider an example. Extractions of mineral, metal, ores, coal, oil, gas, construction materials, etc. violates the groundwater regime and leads to shadowing of rivers, lakes, changes the regime of the water reservoirs. Moreover, harmful chemical elements from groundwater enter water bodies. Development of coal deposits and draining the shaft waters and groundwater results in significant increase the concentration of calcium, iron, and in some cases strontium in surface waters. Despite the fact that groundwater was natural pollution in its composition, man has not influenced its chemical composition in any way. Migration of chemical elements deteriorates the environment's general state. During the oil and gas combustion, carbon dioxide, sulfur compounds, and nitrogen oxide are released into the atmosphere in large quantities. Loss of petroleum products during their transportation significantly harms nature. There are accidents of tankers and drilling platforms, discharge of ballast water and treatment water. Oil production leads to violation of vegetable soil cover, furnace discharge, microrelief. Gas extraction and processing enterprises pollute the atmosphere with hydrocarbons, mainly during the exploration period. Despite the fact that gas as a clean fuel, sometimes these enterprises pollute open water bodies as well as soil. Charges occurring of the atmosphere, hydrosphere and lithosphere affect the biosphere of the development area of mineral deposits. In recent years, intensive destruction of natural ecosystems and the disappearance of many species of living organisms have taken place, which puts biodiversity loss on a special place among the main environmental problems of our time. First of all, that refers to industrial regions, which gradually occupy ever larger and larger spaces. To date, natural ecosystems are completely changed on the fifth part of the land. Thousands of plant and animal species are endangered. Over 9,000 species of animal and nearly 7,000 plant species are listed in the International Union for Conservation of Nature, or at least since 1060s, the disappearance of almost 500 species of animals and 700 plant species is recorded. In fact, the number of species that can have disappeared under that exaction is many times larger, and the rate of disappearance has increased significantly in recent years. It's especially worth noting that the functioning of most industries, for example, machine buildings, clothes, chemical industry, is associated with their location at highly urbanization industrial areas, near transport routes and labor concentration, in areas with altered ecosystems. In turn, the extraction of mineral is connected to their occurrence deposits for development, which requires the construction of new transport routes, the cleaning of significant areas, and the maximum impact on unsoiled nature. It's one of the largest types of industry functioning in violating precisely untouched nature ecosystems. Note that during oil and gas production, no quarries or mines are constructed with there is such a large amount of solid wastes. The production of hydrocarbons is associated with the risk of the soil and gas release, hazardous substances in the processes of drilling, groundwater containing a large number of salts, which leads to the destruction of vegetation and pollution of water reservoirs. Each state in the world today tries to develop norms and rules that would regulate the amounts of emissions from the development of mineral deposits, including oil and gas. Companies, sub-oil users are forced to pay environmental taxes, but this cannot compensate the negative impact of the environment. In Russia, at the moment, there are a number of legal and regulatory acts of the methodologies approved by the government of the Russian Federation, regional leaders, and developed in specialized scientific research organizations that allow calculating damage to biodiversity, objects, and natural ecosystems. Unfortunately, almost of them do not take into account their full breadth of natural ecosystems in full, and do not allow comparing the various ecological, biological, and economic components adequately, accompanying the functioning of the oil and gas producing industry. Some of existing methods, especially tariffs for the calculation of penalties, are outdated. Types of damage to elements of biodiversity and natural ecosystems can be divided into several components: damage to habitats and natural ecosystems, damage to wildlife, damage to biological resources in economic circulation. A more detailed presentation of their types of damage, taking into account possible decreases in the contribution of biodiversity and ecosystems of the excesses of nature and human, requires consideration of the following elements directly related to mining: damage from the habitat destruction, damage from the habitat transformation, damage from the soil and land degradation, biospheric damage to wildlife, damage to a particular species during the migration period, damage to a scientific species calculated in the territory affected, damage to the rare and endangered species, damage to all objects of the animal world on the territory affected by the impact period, damage of the fixed period of negative impact, economic damage of a particular species, prevented damage to bioresources and a result of environmental protection measures. Considering the degree of ecosystem response to the functioning of oil and gas production, enterprises that damage should be considered in the following categories: zone of total loss, a territory that completely loses the properties of the habitat for the period of construction, erection and operation of the facility. Direct impact zone is an area where the influence of the accidentally factor is clearly traced when the presence of large numbers of people round the clock operation of machinery of the factors force animals to leave traditional habitats and ecosystems. The zone of direct impact in a territory which man-made influence is expressed much weaker but nevertheless in traced and proved. Environmental protection measures are an obligatory element of the environmental policy of any enterprise, including oil and gas production, and an obligatory element of the operation process. Each enterprise nature usually necessarily carries out a number of preliminary and compensating environmental measures, which can be supplemented with measures aimed at preserving natural ecosystems.